You're listening to Beyond the Stage from the Carpenter Performing Arts Center at Cal State Long Beach. In each episode, we introduce you to the artists, scholars, students, and arts professionals interpreting our world through the arts. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I have with me Dr. Ray Briggs. Thank you for being here. As a saxophonist, Dr. Briggs has worked with John Clayton, Jeff Clayton, Benny Green, and Rufus Reed. As Assistant Director of Jazz Studies at CSULB, he has coordinated the Jazz Combo program and teaches jazz history and ethnomusicology courses. Dr. Briggs is also director of the Quincy Jones Jazz Camp and co-founder of FEED, which stands for Focus on Education, Equity, and Diversity at the Bob Cole Conservatory of Music at California State University, Long Beach, a bi-weekly forum that focuses on social justice, activism, and inclusion in the areas of music and music education. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. I want to talk a little bit about the FEED program, Focus on Education, Equity, and Diversity. This was, and correct me if I'm wrong, a new program that you started at Bob Cole in the last year. And I think it very much ties into what you were talking about just a few moments ago about this is something that needs to be in the water. It needs to be something that's integrated into what we are breathing in the air, and it's not right now. So how is that shifting? So can you talk a little bit about the program, what you're doing through FEED and what it is and what you hope to achieve or what we are trying to achieve with it?
Sure, absolutely. So, first I want to, make sure I give credit that, I'm one of the co-founders. So there's several professors, Professor Alicia Doyle, Professor John Palkey, Professor Christine Guter. So there are four of us who started talking about, it was in response to, and then, after the murder of George Floyd, and, a lot of people think the whole country, some even say many parts of the world, were just, on this heightened sensitivity of, hey, something's not right. And and not only is this, and it wasn't, what's beautiful about this period is it wasn't just singled on this one event. It wasn't like, we need to not allow black people, especially black men, to be shot down the street or killed in the street and nothing happens. But it seemed like, even though the discussion wasn't necessarily that it wasn't that clear, it seemed like people understood we can do all kinds of things in the spirit of correcting this wrong. That is not just we're going to make sure that police don't kill. No, no, no. That's the kind of the symptom part. But there is something that leads us as a society to this way of thinking about black people. And so this program it was a forum. Every 2 weeks we'd have a different presenter, and we were doing it as our kind of Bob Cole Conservatory response to what does it mean to be just and equitable and represent the diversity of our students and the community that we serve. How do we do that in the arts, right? In music. So, it's interesting because it was a time when I think a lot of students were wondering, well, what can I do? What can I do? Like, I see this is not right. And going back to my earlier years of teaching, I remember sometimes when I would have these conversations, it's interesting how at different points of history, certain conversations don't do what they will do later. Like, I could talk about some of these things, and sometimes certain students would be like, yeah, okay, we know that, or why are we talking about that? I was thinking, okay, but now that where we are in America's history, I can talk about those same things, and students are like, yeah, thank you for that, I appreciate that. Now I understand. So it's like it's kind of like I'm not saying I'm ahead of the pack, but there's like kind of time caught up, kind of time caught up. So I think we're primed for the conversations, and so I have to say that I am very pleased that our department has carved out a space for us to do this because all my years of being here, it hasn't existed. It hasn't existed. And I'm not saying that there was opposition against it, but it just was. It didn't seem to be a desire for it either, right? And so I think all the pain that we saw with the murdering of George Floyd, that there are many people, black and otherwise, who are saying, we have to do what we can to change this climate. So every 2 weeks we'd have a presenter, and we had, I actually did the first presentation. It was on African Americans or people of African descent in classical music. So, and the reason I started with that is I thought, let me think about my audience. As beautiful as the Bob Cole Conservatory of Music is, it is very much slanted towards Western classical music. And that's no fault. I mean, I'm not singling them out. I think most college, music programs are that kind of de facto. Like, if you're going to study music in college or university, you don't ask, well, which music are you going to study? It's like, no, if you're studying music, it's going to be Western classical. Of course, we have jazz, but I think jazz is a much newer form to be studied, and certainly if you look at the weight that's placed on how much jazz you're studying, even as a jazz major, there's like a precursor of classical grounding before you get into jazz. So it's like classical stuff is well represented. So I'm thinking, how can I make the students aware that Black folks have done other things? Like, again, it's like I'm mindful of how African Americans are presented in media forms, movies, TV, so forth, so on, how they're misrepresented. And so when I'm teaching a group of students, not only am I giving them information, but in many ways I am working against those ideas, right? So I have to understand the battlefield, like where are they coming from, and how much of this have they thought about? So when I did the first one, I thought, okay, let me deal with Africans in a field that they're already familiar with. Like they studied Western classical, how it developed, went from monks doing it to like now composers are doing it, and they know that. But how much did they hear people who are African Americans doing it, or people of African descent doing it? Probably not that much, right? So let's expand what they know or what they think they know already. Let's start there, right? So I'm trying to inspire them to say, I never knew that. As much as I've had classes in this, they never talked about some of these people before. The next question is, why not? And I'm not asking the question. I'm saying once they learn it, hopefully it generates, I'm now, in my undergrad degree, I've been studying for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Why haven't I heard this stuff before?
Right.
And if it's happening here, might it have happened in my general history class as well? Might it have happened in how we talk about politics and sports and the whole? In other words, is there this lack of representation in other areas? And if so, what effect in terms of totality? What effect does that have on me? If I don't see Black people except on the 11 o'clock news getting, choked out or shot down or, seen as criminals, how does that affect me and how I see Black people? It has to have an effect, right? It must. And so this kind of inventory, like, that I'm talking about, I think it's an imperative. We must have, if education is to be anything at all, it must be introspective. There has to be this look at, where am I coming from? What have I learned? And it's not a good or bad thing. It's like being honest about, like, did I see any people outside of my community, outside of people who look like me? When I did, how did I see them? Like, what has been my real life experience? What has been my education? What has been my even just kind of encounters, if I have any at all? And if I don't, I ask, well, why didn't I? So again, I think that kind of work I don't think we really foster it, and the result is that we send people out into the world. This I think is the dangerous part, thinking that they are well aware. And as I say to my students all the time, whether you think you have it or not, you all wield influence. You all have it already. Some of you are going to go on to have more influence. You're going to become a director of some program, leading some orchestra, being a professional musician. So what you think about these issues matters, right? Because people are going to follow what you say. And if you're only thinking about these things, guess what? It's probably not going to change. So one, are you really taking inventory? Are there things that you think we can do better? If we are really equitable and fair, a lot of universities, colleges, I joke about this, but if you look at most college and universities' websites, just pick one. I think it's a general kind of approach. Usually it's something like this. You will see the landmark of the university or the college, wherever that is. Could be the clock tower, something that this identifies this space. And in front of it will be standing an African American student, a white student, a Latinx student, you know what I mean, like the Asian student. We're all welcome. Come on in. I said, okay, that sounds great. Looks great on the website. But what I want to see, let's look at the curriculum. In other words, it's what now and again, given our history, that is a step forward. That's progress. Because some of our institutions, many of our institutions, were not welcoming to non-white people. So the very fact that we're saying, hey, these spaces open, that's a great message. But I'm saying let's not stop there. Like, if you can say we're diverse in terms of who we serve, that's cool. But once we get them here, what are we teaching them? How diverse is the curriculum? And if we want to take it a step further, how diverse is who? In terms of the fact, who's teaching them? If we say representation matters, do kids see people like them teaching with authority? Because if they don't, the tacit message is, this is information for you to take, not information for someone like you to give. Right? It's pretty clear. If you work your way up to administration, how diverse is that? Now, again, I'm not calling on any one institution, but I'm saying in my years of being a student and teaching, I've seen it. And again, what I've noticed is they usually, maybe it's like it's a kind of in some ways like tooting our own horn, but it's a buzzword like diversity. Oh, we're diverse. Sounds great, especially in Southern California. We say, oh, we're a diverse community. That is true, but diversity can also be seen or not seen within the power structure. That's where the work has to be done. I think that's where we are now, right? But we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pressing. We can't wait for those in power to say we have arrived, right? And so I think what we see now with George Floyd, I know I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking, it's great that we have this, feed is wonderful. I want to see it continue and I want to see, kind of energy. But I just wonder, like, will people stay committed? Very honestly, like, when things snap back to normal, will they be as, will they feel the urgency? And I think just being, how humanity works, there'll be some that'll stay in the fight. There'll be some who won't. So knowing that, we got to strike while the iron is hot. We have to build momentum so that, if things start to trail off a little bit, there's enough critical mass that we keep it moving, that we keep going forward, right? And we make it a regular part of the discussion, not, oh, look, another black man got shot. Oh, let's talk. No. This is who we want to be. And it needs to not just be, again, I don't want to make it just about black people. It needs to truly be about the diversity of our communities. And are we focused on that? In other words, do we think we're doing our jobs well when we lack diversity at these various levels? Do we feel like we're doing it well? I think, unfortunately, that decision is not left up to a diverse group of judges, right? So then the people who are saying we have crossed the line don't represent the diversity that supposedly we're serving. That's a problem. That I say is a problem. So we have to figure out how to keep addressing that. I think it's logically, it makes sense. It's pretty clear. Just looking around and saying, okay, here's the community. Do we see that in the student body? Check. Do we see that in the faculty? Do we see that at the administrative level? So those are power structures, right? So how do we expect to get to this diversity that we're talking about if the student kind of diversity, if it stopped at the student level? Yes, students have power, but they don't have the kind of power to change the university the way faculty and, you know what I mean? So there's a real thorough look we have to make at the very top and make this conversation. So I think for the feed forum allows us to deal with it at the student level, and it also allows faculty to see that we're very active. And again, I'm very happy about it because it's a space, to be honest, I never thought I would see. To be very honest, I never thought I would see a ongoing forum that allows us to get to some of this. In my classes, I try to get to it, but I'm only one person. And, I try to implement as best I can, but given the subject matter, I can't just, go on a tangent. I have to keep it, in the subject matter. But given that this is an open space, we've had, presenters from the Long Beach Opera, Dr. Durrell Akon, who presented on, Africans in opera. And we've had a great, classical musician, bassoonist, Dr. Garrett McQueen. He came in and talked about African Americans in the symphony orchestra, and the lack of representation, all these things. And so it's like, we have this place to really get at some things that we don't normally cover, right? And so making it a more regular part of who we are as a Black Oak Conservatory, I think it's in line with what we say our mission statement is, right? Now we're just making it, look at this. And if anyone asks, why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? We haven't done this before, because this is what we say we are. This is who we say we are. We're actualizing what we put on paper. And now we're going to hold ourselves accountable to this.
Beyond the Stage is produced by the Carpenter Performing Arts Center at Cal State Long Beach. Views expressed by guests of the show or the host are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the university.